The afternoon sun burned softly over Quiapo, one of Manila's busiest hearts. The air was thick with the smell of roasted corn, exhaust, and rain waiting to fall. People hurried across cracked sidewalks, some holding plastic umbrellas, others holding dreams too heavy for their pockets. Amid the noise, jeepneys honking, vendors shouting, babies crying, two voices rose like a prayer cutting through chaos. Miguel stood barefoot on a square of faded cardboard, strumming an old, scratched guitar with a missing string. Beside him, Leah held a microphone made from a broken karaoke handle taped to a wire. They had no speakers today, just their voices, and the echo of the city bouncing back at them. They sang, "You Raise Me Up." The melody wrapped around the crowd like sunlight slipping through gray clouds. Leah's voice, pure and crystalline, carried the high notes with a trembling grace, while Miguel's deeper tone anchored her like the sea cradles the sky. Their harmony was not perfect, but it was honest, the kind that made people stop just for a second to feel something. Coins clinked into their small tin box. Mostly pesos, sometimes a few foreign coins tossed by tourists. A few steps away, a street child clapped along out of rhythm, grinning with missing teeth. Leah winked at him mid-song, and the boy giggled. When the last note faded, the market noise filled the silence again. Miguel took a deep breath and looked at Leah. "Another round?" he asked, wiping the sweat from his brow. Leah nodded, her dark hair sticking to her forehead. "Let's do an act next." For Nane, they began again, this time with a gentler sadness. "Nang esalang ka sa mundong ito." The words carried the ache of every Filipino parent who worked overseas, every child who grew up missing lullabies. As they sang, people slowed down. Some placed bills in the box quietly. An old man stood nearby, his eyes wet. Leah's mother had worked as a cleaner in Dubai for years. Miguel's father had been a construction worker who never came home from a job site. Music, for both of them, wasn't just passion. It was memory, grief, and survival. As the final chorus faded, a small crowd applauded. One man, a tourist with a camera slung around his neck, lingered. He looked at them not with pity but admiration. "You too," he said in accented English, "have voices that belong on a stage, not a sidewalk." Miguel chuckled shyly. "Sir, this is our stage," he said, patting his guitar. "And those jeepneys, our audience's ride home." The tourist laughed but didn't move on. He started recording as they prepared another song. This time, Leah whispered, "Let's give him something special." Miguel strummed the opening chords of "You Raise Me Up." Again, this time slower, deeper. The sky above them darkened. The first drops of rain beginning to fall. They didn't stop. The rain became rhythm. The thunder became harmony. Miguel tilted his head back, eyes closed, his fingers moving like he was playing not just an instrument, but the story of his life. Leah's voice soared above it all, bright, trembling, fearless. When they reached the final line, "You raise me up to more than I can bear." The rain was pouring in earnest. Water streamed down their faces, but neither flinched. The crowd cheered under umbrellas, and even the tourist's camera lens fogged with mist and emotion. The man approached them afterward, soaked but smiling. "You have to audition for Got Talent," he said. "I'm serious. I'll post this video tonight. People need to hear you." Miguel grinned skeptically. "Ah sir, that's too big for us. We just sing here to buy rice and guitar strings." Leah looked away, though her eyes flickered with something. A spark she hadn't let herself feel in a long time. "Maybe someday," she said quietly. "Someday might be sooner than you think." The tourist said, tapping his phone, "Just wait." He left them with a thumbs up and a promise. Miguel shook his head as they began packing up their things. "You think he's serious?" Leah shrugged, wringing out her wet shirt. "Even if he isn't, at least we made someone believe for a while." They carried their gear through puddles, their reflections wobbly in the water. The city lights began to flicker on, gold against the gathering dusk. They stopped at a small food stall, shared a single bowl of lugaw rice porridge, and laughed when the vendor called them the Rain Singers. Later that night, back in their cramped apartment, they sat by the window watching lightning dance across the skyline. Miguel plucked quietly at his guitar while Leah hummed a tune, her voice barely above a whisper. "You ever think," she began, "that maybe we're meant for something more?" Miguel smiled faintly. "We are. But maybe that more isn't fame. Maybe it's just making people smile for 5 minutes." Leah looked at him. Really looked. And something in her chest softened. "You always make everything sound simpler than it is." He strummed another chord, shrugging. "Because life's already complicated enough." They laughed, but neither could shake the feeling that something unseen was already moving. Like a note hanging in the air, waiting to resolve. Outside, the rain continued to fall over Manila. Over dreamers, over broken roofs, over songs that refused to be silenced. And somewhere across the ocean, in a quiet London apartment, a man uploaded a video titled, "Filipino Street Singers Perform, You Raise Me Up in the Rain. Must Watch." The thumbnail showed two soaked figures beneath a gray sky, their hands clasped over a battered guitar, their faces lit with something the world was about to recognize. Hope. By morning, their world would never be the same. The sound of roosters crowing echoed through the narrow alleyways of Tondo, as the morning light crept through the small cracks of Miguel and Leah's shared apartment. The place was no bigger than a storage room, thin plywood walls, a single flickering bulb, and a window that opened to the smell of fried fish from the street below. Miguel sat cross-legged on the floor, strumming his guitar softly, humming bits of melodies that came to him in dreams. Leah was boiling water on a rusty single burner, her voice still hoarse from singing in the rain the night before. She didn't know it yet, but the video of their street performance was already being shared across the world. "Coffee?" she asked, handing Miguel a cup of instant 3-in-1. He grinned. "Only if it comes with a song." She rolled her eyes. "Everything comes with a song for you." Just then, Miguel's old phone, its screen cracked, its case held together with tape, buzzed and vibrated violently on the floor. Notifications popped up one after another. At first, he thought it was a glitch. Then he noticed the flood of messages. "Wait, what's happening?" he muttered, eyes widening. Leah leaned over his shoulder, wiping her hands on her shorts. "Did we get hacked?" Miguel scrolled, his fingers trembling. "No. Look, our video. It's everywhere." They stared at the screen. The same video that the tourist had promised to post was now on YouTube. "Filipino Street Singers Perform, You Raise Me Up in the Rain. Must Watch." Views 1.2 million. Comments 45,000, likes 320,000. The feed was filled with hearts, crying emojis, and comments from all over the world. "I felt every note. Their voices are pure soul. Someone needs to get them on Got Talent." Lia's hand flew to her mouth. "This can't be real." Miguel just sat there, stunned. His heartbeat drowned out every sound around them. "Look," Leah whispered, pointing. "Even celebrities are sharing it. There's a post from Josh Groban's official page. This duet reminds me why music matters." Miguel nearly dropped the phone. Josh Groban. Banoon, their alleyway was filled with curious neighbors. Children who once laughed at their street singing were now asking for selfies. The local vendor gave them free Tahoe sweet tofu, grinning from ear to ear. "You're famous," the vendor teased. "Don't forget us when you go to Hollywood." Miguel and Leah laughed, but underneath their smiles was disbelief. And a flicker of something dangerous hope. That evening, as the city lights blinked on, Miguel checked his email for the first time in weeks. Amid the usual spam and junk, one subject line made him freeze. Subject: Invitation to Audition Britain's Got Talent World Stage 2025. He clicked it open. The email was brief but powerful. "Dear Miguel and Leah, we recently came across your viral video. We were deeply moved by your performance and would love to invite you to audition for Britain's Got Talent World Stage 2025 in London this February. Your story and your music represent everything we believe the world needs right now: authenticity, heart and hope. Please respond within 72 hours to confirm your participation. With love, the BGT World Stage Team." Miguel's jaw fell open. "Leah," he whispered. "You need to read this." Leah wiped her hands nervously on her jeans as she leaned in. When she finished reading, she didn't speak for a long time. Then softly, "Is this real? Is this actually happening?" Miguel's hands shook. "It's from an official address. Look at the logo. The blue star, the signature, everything, it's real." Leah sat down slowly, covering her face. "Oh my God." Her voice cracked. "Miguel, we've never even been on a plane." He laughed shakily, trying to calm her, but his eyes were just as teary. "Wes will find out how it feels." They both sat in silence, the weight of the moment pressing on their chests. The sounds of the city outside, the honking, the laughter, the endless movement, faded into a soft hum. Inside, there was only the sound of two heartbeats trying to believe in something bigger than their struggle. Then came the question neither wanted to ask. How do we even afford it? Howie counted on her fingers. Plane tickets, passports, visas, hotel. "Miguel, we can't even pay next month's rent." He sighed. "I'll pawn my guitar." She looked up sharply. "No. You won't. That guitar's your life." "Then we'll pawn something else," he said firmly. "We'll figure it out. This is our chance." They spent the next week running between government offices. standing in lines that stretched for hours, filling out forms they barely understood, borrowing money from kind neighbors and strangers online who had seen their video and wanted to help. One overseas Filipino worker in Canada sent them 100 with a message for your dream. Make us proud. For the first time, Miguel and Leah realized that their dream wasn't just their own anymore. It belonged to everyone who believed in them. Finally, the day of departure arrived. The airport was a whirlwind of noise and emotion. Leah clutched her guitar case like it was a lifeline. Miguel carried a worn backpack with their entire lives inside, 2 changes of clothes, a rosary, and a notebook full of lyrics. They stood in front of the departure gate, hands clasped, staring at the plane that would take them halfway across the world. Leah's voice trembled. What if we're not good enough? Miguel looked at her, smiling softly. Then we sing anyway. Because we didn't come this far to be perfect, we came this far to be heard. She nodded, wiping her tears. As the plane took off, Leah pressed her forehead against the window, watching the city shrink beneath the clouds. The glittering lights of Manila looked like 1,000 candles flickering in the dark. For everyone who never got the chance to dream, she whispered, almost to herself. Miguel turned toward her, smiling faintly. That's the title of our next song. And for the first time in their lives, the world below didn't look impossible. It looked small enough to hold in their hearts. The plane touched down in London under a grey sky that seemed to hum with anticipation. Miguel and Leah stepped out into the cold morning air, their breaths visible, their hearts racing. The city stretched before them, massive, unfamiliar, and alive. They'd never seen buildings so tall, people moving so fast, or skies so heavy with clouds. For 2 singers who had spent their lives performing beside a cracked Manila fountain, London felt like another planet. They arrived at the Britain's Got Talent World Stage 2025 venue 2 days later, carrying the same guitar that had survived typhoons, broken strings, and years of sidewalk performances. Miguel's hands were trembling. Leah kept glancing at her reflection in the glass walls, almost unable to believe she was really there. Inside, the atmosphere buzzed with nerves and dreams. Contestants from all over the world, dancers, magicians, opera singers, even a ventriloquist from Kenya, filled the waiting area. Everyone had a story, everyone had a reason to be there. Leah squeezed Miguel's hand. Do you think they'll understand our story? She whispered. Miguel looked at her and smiled gently. Music doesn't need translation, Leah. Their number was called. Next up, contestant 324, Miguel and Leah from the Philippines. The stage lights blinded them as they stepped out. The vastness of the theater swallowed them whole. Thousands of faces disappeared into the dark, but the 4 judges sat illuminated in front. Simon Cowell, Amanda Holden, Alicia Dixon and Bruno Tonioli. The moment they had seen on TV so many times was suddenly real. Simon leaned forward, eyes narrowed with curiosity. Hello there. What are your names? Miguel cleared his throat, his voice barely steady. Good evening, Sir Simon. I'm Miguel, and this is Leah. We're from Manila, Philippines. The audience clapped politely. Amanda smiled warmly. Welcome, both of you. What brings you to Britain's Got Talent? Miguel took a deep breath. We sing together on the streets of Manila. We never thought we'd be standing here, but someone recorded us one rainy night. That video changed our lives. There was a murmur in the audience, people already intrigued. Simon tilted his head slightly. So, this is your first time performing on a real stage? Leah nodded shyly. Yes, sir. We've only ever sung on the street. Simon's gaze softened, just a little. All right then. What are you going to sing for us today? Miguel smiled. A song for everyone who's ever felt small. He strummed the first note of You Raise Me Up. The sound filled the hall. A single trembling chord, but it carried the weight of every street corner, every sleepless night, every tear shade over lost hope. Leah's voice joined in, clear and fragile, like the first ray of dawn after a storm. When I am down, and oh my soul, so weary, the words echoed through the silence. The crowd so loud moments ago had gone still. Leah closed her eyes, her voice lifting higher with each line, trembling with emotion. Miguel's harmony blended with hers, rich and grounding, like an anchor pulling her safely through the storm of her nerves. Simon's expression changed, curiosity giving way to something else, something unguarded. As they reached the second verse, Leah's voice cracked, just slightly, her throat tightened from emotion. For a split second, fear flashed across her face. But Miguel stepped closer, resting his hand gently on hers. He sang louder, steadier. His voice wrapping around hers like a promise, you're not alone. She looked at him, tears glistening under the spotlight, and found her courage again. Her voice returned, stronger, soaring higher than before. You raise me up, to more than I can be. The final chorus built like a wave crashing against the walls. Every note was a cry, a memory, a prayer. When the song ended, the last note hung in the air, trembling between them and the silence that followed. Then, an explosion of applause. The audience rose to their feet. People were cheering, whistling, crying. Amanda covered her mouth, shaking her head. That was heavenly, she whispered. Alicia wiped a tear. Your voices together, it's like they were made for each other. That was pure emotion. Bruno leaned forward, gesturing wildly. You didn't just sing, you told us a story. That was a journey from the streets to the stars. But everyone was waiting for one person, Simon Cowell. He sat perfectly still, his eyes fixed on the two trembling singers on stage. Then, slowly he spoke. When you said you came from the streets, I didn't expect this. He began softly. I didn't expect to feel what I just felt. You reminded me why I love this show. He leaned closer, his voice thick with emotion. There are moments on this stage that remind us all what humanity sounds like. And this was one of them. Aaliyah covered her mouth, trying not to cry. Miguel just stood there, speechless, gripping his guitar as though it was keeping him upright. The audience began chanting, "Golden buzzer! Golden buzzer! Golden buzzer!" Simon looked at his fellow judges, then back at Miguel and Leah. A small smile tugged at the corner of his lips. He pressed the golden buzzer. The hall erupted in a shower of golden confetti. The air sparkled, the music swelled. Miguel fell to his knees, overcome by disbelief. Leah burst into tears, covering her face as confetti rained down like blessings. Simon stood up, clapping slowly, his eyes moist. You've not only raised each other up, he said. You've raised all of us. Miguel turned to Leah, still trembling. We did it, we actually did it. He whispered, his voice breaking. Leah nodded, her tears falling freely. For everyone back home, she whispered back. They hugged tightly as the crowd continued to cheer, and for that one golden moment, the whole world seemed to stop, not because of fame, or spectacle, but because two voices born in hardship had reached across continents and touched something sacred in the human heart. When the lights dimmed, and the confetti settled on the stage floor, Simon leaned into his mic and said softly, "Remember this day. This is what the world needs to hear." Miguel and Leah left the stage hand in hand. The same way they had always faced life together. And somewhere deep inside, they both knew this wasn't the end of their song. It was just the beginning of a miracle they never dared to dream. Golden confetti floated through the air like tiny pieces of heaven falling to earth. Miguel and Leah stood in the middle of the Britain's Got Talent stage, their bodies trembling, their faces streaked with tears and disbelief. The roar of the crowd thundered in their ears. Clapping, cheering, shouting their names in unison. For a moment, time seemed to stretch endlessly, and all they could see were the swirling flecks of gold catching the light. Miguel blinked, dazed, his hand still gripping the neck of his battered guitar. He looked down at it, this old, cracked thing that had been pawned, repaired, and played until its wood was more scar than polish. "We made it," he whispered, his voice shaking, half to himself, half to the guitar that had carried them through years of hunger and hope. Leah turned toward him, her eyes wide, her breath hitching between sobs. "Miguel, it's real. We did it." The golden buzzer. The confetti rained harder, sticking to their wet faces, glimmering on their skin. She covered her mouth with both hands, shaking her head as tears streamed freely. The audience's ovation went on and on, people standing on their seats, waving flags, crying openly. Simon Cowell stood up from his chair, something he rarely did. His expression was soft, his usual sternness replaced with something unguarded, deeply human. He walked toward them slowly as the music faded to silence. The cameras followed him. The crowd quieted. The only sound left was the gentle fluttering of confetti hitting the stage. Simon reached them, stopping just a few feet away. His voice was calm, but it carried weight, every word cutting through the stillness. "Do you know how rare it is," he said, "to hear two voices that not only sound beautiful together, but make you feel something? You made us forget this is a competition. You made us remember why we listened to music in the first place." Elia's hand flew to her chest. Miguel bowed his head, unable to speak. Simon took a deep breath, his tone softening even more. "I've been judging shows for a long time. But every few years, something extraordinary happens. Something that makes even me speechless." He looked at them with misty eyes. "Tonight, you were that moment." A murmur of emotion rippled through the audience. Simon Cowell, the man famous for his sharp tongue and impossible standards, was crying. Amanda Holden wiped her own tears, whispering into her mic, That was the most moving thing I've ever seen on this stage. Alicia Dixon leaned forward, smiling through her tears. The world needs voices like yours right now. Voices that remind us of hope. Bruno Tonioli blew a kiss toward them, his voice full of passion. That performance was pure gold. The golden buzzer was the only thing to do. It wasn't a choice, it was destiny. The audience erupted again, a wave of emotion surging through the hall. Miguel and Leah turned to each other, overwhelmed. Miguel reached out, brushing a piece of confetti from Leah's hair. "Hey," he whispered softly, his voice trembling. "We're not dreaming, right?" Leah shook her head, laughing through her tears. "No, Miguel. This is real." The host aunt came rushing onto the stage, microphone in hand, shouting above the cheers. "Ladies and gentlemen, Miguel and Leah from the Philippines, your golden buzzer act of the night." The lights brightened. Cameras zoomed in as aunt held their hands up in victory. The audience chanted their names, Miguel,
Miguel, Leah.
And the two of them simply stood there, humbled and stunned. When the cameras cut for a commercial break, the producers rushed in, handing them tissues, hugging them, congratulating them in accents that blurred together in their dizzy joy. One of the crew whispered, "Simon hasn't pressed that buzzer all season, until now." That truth hit Miguel like lightning. He sank to his knees again, this time not out of disbelief but gratitude. "Thank you, Lord," he murmured under his breath, "for this miracle." Backstage, minutes later, they were ushered into a small interview room still shaking and laughing. Golden flecks clung to their hair and eyelashes. The host asked them how they felt. Miguel smiled shyly, his voice soft but steady. "I used to sing for coins on the street. Now I just sang for the world." Leah added quietly, "We didn't expect this. We just wanted to share our story. But tonight showed us that sometimes, the world is listening more than you think." As they spoke, the comments began pouring in online. Millions were already watching clips of their performance. Filipino Duet trended globally within hours. Viewers across continents were crying, reposting, and writing messages like, "Their voices healed something in me I didn't know was broken. Simon cried. I cried. Everyone cried. These two just reminded me why the world still has hope." Across the ocean, in a small alley in Manila, the people who once stopped to watch them perform gathered around a flickering TV in a sari store. The moment Simon pressed the golden buzzer, the entire alley erupted in cheers. Vendors clapped, children shouted, and someone lit a small firecracker in celebration.
"That's our Miguel!"
they shouted. Back in London, Miguel and Leah sat in a quiet corner of the dressing room. The noise had finally died down. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by a gentle calm. Miguel leaned back, eyes closed, listening to the faint hum of the stage beyond the wall. Leah broke the silence. "Do you remember that night? When it rained, and we didn't stop singing?" He smiled faintly. "I remember. We didn't have enough money for dinner. But we still sang like it was the end of the world." She nodded. "And now, here we are, singing for the whole world." Miguel opened his eyes, turning to her. "You know, Leah, I think this." He gestured around them, at the gold confetti still scattered across the floor. "Isn't the reward? The real reward was every day we didn't give up." Leah smiled, tears forming again. "Yeah, every day we sang, even when no one listened." He looked down at his guitar, running his fingers gently over the strings. "We sang for love, not for luck. And maybe that's why love answered back." In the distance, they could hear the faint echo of the crowd still cheering for them. Their names, their country, their song. The sound washed over them like a blessing. Outside, Simon was standing by the judge's table, still holding his coffee cup, still quiet. Amanda leaned toward him and said softly, "You really felt that one, didn't you?" Simon nodded slowly, still watching the empty stage. "It wasn't just singing," he said. "It was soul. Pure, human soul." He took a long breath and whispered, almost to himself, "Sometimes the world needs to be reminded what hope sounds like." And that night, hope had sounded like two young Filipinos singing in harmony. Not just for a prize, but for everyone who had ever been forgotten, overlooked, or silenced. They didn't just win a golden buzzer. They awakened something golden in everyone who heard them. The Manila sun was just beginning to rise when the plane landed. The golden light washed over the tarmac, soft and warm, like a quiet applause from home itself. As Miguel and Leah stepped out of the airport, they were met with a sight that made their hearts swell. Dozens of people holding handmade signs that read, "Welcome home." The golden voices. "Proud to be Filipino. You raise us up." The faces weren't strangers. They were vendors from the market, Tricycle drivers, teachers, and children from the same streets where Miguel and Leah once sang for spare coins. Reporters from local stations gathered around, microphones ready, but all Miguel could do was smile humbly and wave.
Kamusta, Miguel?
Kamusta, Leah? Shouted a man from the crowd. It was Mang Ed, the Tahoe vendor who used to give them free breakfast. He had tears in his eyes. You did it. You made the world see us. Leah laughed and hugged him. We didn't do it alone, Mang Ed. You were part of our song, too. From that moment, their story spread like wildfire throughout the Philippines. Two street singers from Manila, now international stars, chosen by Simon Cowell himself. News programs replayed their audition clip on every channel, showing the golden confetti falling over two trembling singers. People cried, cheered, and even prayed as they watched. But fame was never their goal. The true victory was the message they carried back home. Weeks passed. The chaos of media attention slowly faded, replaced by something deeper and more meaningful. Miguel and Leah didn't move to a mansion or sign expensive record deals. Instead, they returned to the cracked fountain where it had all begun. The same spot where they'd once sung in the rain. Only now, the fountain had been repainted, cleaned, and surrounded by flowers. A new plaque stood at its base. Here, hope found its voice. Miguel and Leah 2025. That morning, they set up their same old guitar and microphone. But when Leah began to sing the first note, people gathered instantly. Children, parents, students, even street cleaners. This time, they weren't singing for survival, they were singing for everyone who still dreamed in silence. Miguel strummed gently and spoke into the mic. Before, we sang because it was all we had. Now we sing because we want every child here to know. Your voice matters. Don't let the world tell you otherwise. A small boy in the crowd raised his hand. Kuya, 8, can I sing too? Leah smiled, nodding. Of course. What's your name? Raman, the boy said shyly. My tete drives a jeepney. He says singing is just for rich people. Miguel knelt to meet his eyes. Raman, tell your tete this. Music is for everyone who has a heart. The boy's smile spread wide as Leah handed him the microphone. His small, trembling voice began a simple Filipino folk song. The crowd clapped along, and when he finished, they cheered as if he were on the same stage Miguel and Leah once stood on. That single moment planted an idea. One that would change countless lives. Over the following months, Miguel and Leah used the modest prize money from Britain's Got Talent to open a small community music center in Tondo. They called it the Harmony House. The sign outside read, for every child who sings, even when no one listens. Inside, the walls were covered in murals, paintings of children singing, playing guitars, and reaching for stars. They taught anyone who came for free. Guitars were donated by musicians around the world who had heard their story. Local artists volunteered as teachers. Even Simon Cowell himself sent a letter, framed and displayed by the door. The world heard your voices, but your real gift is how you're helping others find theirs. Simon Cowell. Every afternoon, the sound of music filled the narrow streets. Laughter, broken notes, giggles, claps, and songs that rose above the chaos of the city. The once gray neighborhood now pulsed with color and rhythm. But despite their success, Miguel and Leah remained the same. They still ate street food by the sidewalk, still laughed over spilled coffee, still shared one umbrella during sudden rainstorms. Fame had not changed their hearts. It had only given them a bigger audience for their kindness. One evening, as the sun dipped below the Manila skyline, they sat on the steps outside Harmony House, listening to the children inside singing. You raise me up. Leah leaned her head on Miguel's shoulder. Do you ever think about London? He smiled. Every day. But you know what I think about more? What? That night in the rain. When it all began. I think maybe miracles don't start on big stages. Maybe they start when you keep singing. Even when nobody's listening. Leah looked at him. The boy who had turned hardship into harmony. And her eyes softened. We didn't just sing our story, Miguel. We sang everyone's story. He looked out toward the city, lights twinkling like fireflies. And now, they're singing it too. A month later, Britain's Got Talent World Stage invited them back. This time not as contestants, but as guest performers. The producers introduced them as the duet that changed the world's heart. When they walked on stage again, Simon Cowell smiled, standing to greet them. The audience cheered before they even sang a note. Miguel spoke first, his voice calm but powerful. Last year, we stood here as dreamers. Today we stand here as believers, not in fame but in kindness. Because sometimes, the smallest voices can echo the loudest in the world. Leah added softly, this song isn't just for us anymore. It's for the children who sing on the streets tonight, waiting for someone to listen. Then, together, they sang. You Raise Me Up. But this time, their performance carried something deeper. Not pain but peace. Every note shimmered with gratitude. The audience held their breath, many wiping away tears. When they finished, Simon stood once again, eyes glistening. The world is a little better because of your song, he said quietly. Miguel and Leah bowed, hand in hand, under the same kind of golden light that had once changed their lives. But this time, there was no confetti. Only applause, pure and unending. Back in Manila, years later, the fountain still stood. A little older, a little cracked again, but still beautiful. The Harmony House had grown into a small foundation, helping hundreds of children discover music. Some became singers, others teachers, but all carried a piece of Miguel and Leah's dream inside them. One day, a tourist walked by and asked a little girl strumming a small guitar, "Do you know who Miguel and Leah are?" The girl smiled. "Of course. They're the reason we sing here." And somewhere, in the gentle hum of the city, in the laughter of children and the echo of voices rising together, you could almost hear Miguel and Leah's harmony again. Not on a stage, not on TV, but in the hearts of those they'd inspired. Dreams don't belong to the rich or the lucky. Miguel's voice seemed to whisper through the wind. They belong to the brave. And with that, the duet that once began in the rain became a melody the world would never forget. A song that changed everything.